Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for taking the time today to learn a little bit about Windows Intune. My name is Paul Wismar. I'm a Senior Systems Consultant with Nortec Communications. Windows Intune, pretty cool stuff. I had to take the pulse of the marketplace. I would say there's not a whole lot of knowledge out there about it, and I'm not sure why exactly because it's a pretty solid offering from Microsoft in terms of the cloud services stuff. So without further ado, let's get things kicked off here. All right, so just want to give a little context to the discussion to sort of start the narrative about, where we are today and why we might need a solution like Intune and how it'll work for us in our environment. So what we're seeing today is, users expect to be able to work from anywhere and, pretty much all the time. Their schedules have become more flexible and, we have to start adopting to that mode of thinking. And devices. Everybody has multiple devices. I read a statistic that a typical person who's a quote information worker has up to 5 devices that they have. And applications, deploying and managing applications across platforms is difficult. We might develop iOS stuff where we need a way to deploy iOS stuff and obviously Windows-based stuff, and doing all that becomes cumbersome. And then also that data, the data that the users need access to from multiple locations, what's the best way to maintain that and secure that data? So what we've sort of seen is kind of these client management silos where you might have a particular process for managing your PCs on premises, and that might be things like WSUS or System Center Configuration Manager, and then you might be using a third-party tool to manage your mobile devices, or maybe you're not yet using anything to manage your mobile devices. So we kind of see that disjoint management of things. So what we're seeing today, consumerization of IT, I mean, it's here to stay. People expect to be able to bring their own devices and they expect to be able to get connected up to company resources on those devices. The younger generations that are coming into the workforce, it's really not even a question for them anymore. It's kind of an expectation that we as IT pros are able to provide a means for people to access company data on personal devices. So it's kind of we're enabling, we need to start thinking about enabling those users, allowing them to work from wherever on the device of their choice. We have to find a way to kind of unify our environment, and that might be, how do we get AD to talk up to some mobile device management? We're gonna talk through those scenarios and see some of that stuff in the coming slides. And then how do we protect that data that's being accessed remotely? Just let me step back for a second. Just logistically, I have like 15 minutes of slides that we're going to go through quickly, hopefully, and then I'm going to jump into a demo, which is going to be about 15 minutes or so, and then I'm going to open it up to questioning. I don't think we'll take the whole hour, but if we do, great. If not, then we can all get to lunch a little bit earlier. So kind of the solution to the problems that we're talking about, people having devices, being inside and outside the network, is Windows Intune. So Intune as a whole it's for managing client devices, such as Windows desktops, laptops, tablets, mobile devices, and that's iOS and Android. The devices can be domain joined or not, such as in the case of bring your own device, like we're discussing. We can enforce policies for Windows updates, for anti-malware, for firewall settings. We can distribute software for both desktop and modern store apps. We can remotely wipe and block mobile devices, and Windows phones and iOS can be directly managed, meaning we can get some extra settings using the native tools of the platform and not layering on something like Exchange ActiveSync. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. At the moment, Android devices are still managed using Exchange ActiveSync policies. And the great thing about Intune is smaller organizations can manage their entire client infrastructure with Intune. It's a very powerful and robust cloud-based solution, as we're going to see. Intune is licensed, per user as a subscription, and each user can have up to 5 devices, which can be a combination of desktops, laptops, tablets, phones, what have you. Anywhere a user wants to access the data from any device, we can make that happen with Intune. And of course, one of the big keys of Intune is mobile device management, and we get a much richer experience with Intune than we do strictly with Exchange Active Sync policies. So Intune as a whole, there's two configurations that you can go with. The cloud-only configuration, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and then there's also a unified configuration, which works in conjunction with System Center Configuration Manager deployed on premises, and that kind of handles the PC management type things, and then that connects up into Intune to provide you with mobile device management. But like I said, today is going to be cloud only configuration, and I'm going to show you how robust you can actually get with that. So this is the overall architecture, sort of all the moving parts that go into the Intune cloud architecture. I really like this slide because it's all right there laid out for you. It shows you everything that is involved in the process of deploying it and all the pieces that are in play. And we're going to step through some of this stuff. The idea today is not to get into a ton of depth around anything, but just sort of introduce Intune, see how it might work for you, and then go from there. So obviously being the cloud-only architecture, all of your management is going to be done through a simple web-based interface, which we're going to see in the demo, and you can control all of your devices, Windows RT, phone, iOS, Android, and we need a way to get our on-prem identities into the cloud, or we can provision the identities directly into the cloud, and we're going to see how that process works. So I like this slide just because everything's there. I mean, these are all the pieces that you need to know in terms of the architecture. So like I said, Intune's actually, it's a cloud offering, so it's a web-based portal that we log into. We're going to see this in the demo in a little bit, and I'll get into a little bit more depth there, but I just kind of wanted to introduce the concept of, it's a simple web-based interface where we go to provision our users, and then we assign devices to those users. Okay, so kind of in typical Microsoft thinking here, the way that we assign devices is by managing a user. So that user needs to have an identity within Windows Intune, and there's 3 different ways that you can do this. And if any of you are already Office 365 customers or have seen it, then all of this is going to be really familiar to you. So the first scenario is cloud only, and there's no integration with your on-premises Active Directory. So we can just create new users within Windows Intune. We can give a username and password to the user, and away we go. Maybe if you're a smaller organization, that makes sense. You don't care if users have to have 2 different sets of usernames and passwords. Maybe that works perfectly for you. Scenario 2 is directory synchronization. And in this scenario, what we're doing is we're taking our on-prem directory synchronization, so our on-prem identities, our user accounts within AD, and we're syncing those up to Windows Intune. So in that sense, you have the same username and password in both places. You will be prompted to enter your username and password a second time when you're hitting the cloud service, but it's effectively the same credentials across both, although it's 2 separate identities. And then the third is directory synchronization with federated single sign-on, which is ADFS. So that effectively joins the 2 identities into a single identity and does the authentication on our behalf. So that's the most seamless way to get the identities into Windows Intune in order to assign devices to them. And this will make sense as we keep going. So that's the easiest from the end user's perspective, but it's the most complicated in terms of the way that we have to set things up in the background. Okay, so like I said, Microsoft thinking, right? So it's users are assigned to groups, and then policies are assigned to those groups, and then devices are assigned to the users. So, sort of the 3 main things that we need to think about when we're talking about Intune is, like I said, managed user. So how are we getting those accounts created in Intune? And just a couple of slides here just to walk you through some basic stuff about the users, the groups, and the policies. So with users, we can track software deployment, policy deployment, and device management tasks. Like I said, the device is associated with a user up to 5 devices. So groups, what we'll do is we'll create groups within Windows Intune, and those groups can be populated with the identities that we've synchronized from our on-prem directory or the identities that we've created right in Windows Intune itself. And typical sort of OU structure based thing where you'll create the groups based on, geographical location, based on the role, different types of hardware, different functions. Maybe I want to have engineering have its own set of policies and its own groups versus, sales type thing. So again, pretty straightforward Microsoft thinking if you've, been working with Microsoft technologies over the years. Group functions, so device groups, that's how we can do our PC updates, software deployment, push. We can use GPOs and such to get the stuff out onto the devices. The Intune agent settings, we can do firewall settings, the Intune Center policy, which we'll see that in the demo. We can get notifications, we can do reporting on devices, and then user groups, that's where we do software publishing where things can be pulled to mobile devices, iOS-based applications, Android-based applications and such. And then, kind of most importantly, our mobile device security policy. So kind of the heart or, the meat of Intune is these policy-based templates, right? So we're creating policies, we're applying those policies to groups, which in turn apply to devices. So the heart of it is creating these policies in order to control the behavior of the devices that we have enrolled within Windows Intune. And we'll see this more in the demo, but just again, user group policy, and then the devices are assigned to the user. So here's the Windows Intune Center. This is something that's pushed out in PC deployments, and I can pop out quickly here and show this to you on my machine. So with the Windows Intune Center, part of what's deployed to a PC. So you see there's a bunch of different things I can do here. I can get applications from the company portal, and that's things that we've published up there. Updating, I can check for updates. It tells me when that stuff was done. Endpoint protection. This is not actually being deployed to me because I have semantic endpoint protection installed, but if I didn't, then the endpoint protection pushed out from Intune would be deployed to my machine, and the policies understand hierarchy, so it checks to see if I have any sort of endpoint protection installed, and if I do, it doesn't push a second form of endpoint protection. And then I can also initiate some remote assistance from here. So just to give you a little bit of perspective of what it looks like from the client. All right, so mobile device management with Intune. So pretty cool. We can do direct management of Windows RT, Windows Phone 8, and iOS, which means we're using the native tools built into the platform. We're not layering on, some sort of third-party application, or we're not using Exchange ActiveSync in the case of those direct managed devices, the way we still have to with Android. But it's over the air. We can do inventory of the mobile devices. We can control settings. That's the policy stuff I was talking about. We can do mobile application management, and then we can protect the corporate data that's going out to these machines, to these devices rather. I just wanted to throw this in there just so that we understand that direct mobile device management is more encompassing. It's more robust than just using Exchange ActiveSync policies. ActiveSync policies have been around for a while, and this direct mobile device management is really great because it gives us a more encompassing feature set of the things that we can actually control on the devices. So just straight talking in terms of BYOD, we're extending support to remote workforces without adding IT infrastructure, which I think is pretty awesome. We're extending support to multiple device platforms, this iOS, Android, and Windows. And we're extending support to mobile workforces without, complex IT administration. It's pretty straightforward in terms of, the Windows philosophy of doing things, like I said, users, groups, and policies. So part of it is, a self-service experience. It's that the users can consume what it is that they want to consume, and they can enroll devices that they want to enroll. So we can connect every user device to the service, like I said, up to 5. We can enable them to grab applications that we've published, and that's across all the different platforms. We let users manage their own devices and data. They can enroll, rename and wipe data and email from their devices. Obviously, we're going to have some sort of policy to hand them when they're onboarded, but the process can all be initiated by them, which is pretty cool. And then we're providing a premium end user experience where things look the same across platforms. So here you go, just to speak to that a little bit. So Windows RT, it's a native Windows application, Phone 8, same kind of thing. And then with iOS, it's a native iOS application, and all of those are getting us to the company portal where we can enroll the device, we can grab software, and we're gonna see some of that stuff in the demo, so it'll become more clear. Okay, again, I'm not trying to throw a ton of information at you with this slide. I just want to sort of drill home the idea of, there's a lot of different things that we can do here. There's a lot of different management options that we have across the various platforms. Okay, mobile device inventory. So we can see the various, once the user's managed and they've enrolled some devices, we can see hardware properties for those devices. We don't see any personal software inventory, and that's kind of key, is this idea of keeping the company data isolated or separate or encapsulated away from the user's individual private data. So we can do inventorying on devices that we have enrolled, but we're not inventorying the personal software. We're only inventorying the hardware itself and the managed applications that we've published via the company portal. But we can track the storage on the devices, which will allow us to sort of get out in front of any potential issues. Settings management, it's just sort of reiterating the fact that we're using these policies to control the various platforms and control the settings and getting things the way we want it. And it's sort of a mix of keeping the personal data isolated, but yet still allowing us to control the device and the company's data on the device. So we have our security policies. We can report up on anything that's enrolled in the service. We can use the same templates for the direct management. Again, that's the native platform tools and Exchange ActiveSync. And as we said, Android and the older versions of the Windows phones can still be managed via ActiveSync. So the application management, and again, I just wanted to include this to show you how robust the service is. I mean, we can deploy applications and have applications pulled across all of the different platforms. Software distributions, just setting the stage that, hey, all these things are supported within Intune. Each of the native application packages, including the MSI and XE stuff from the Windows side of the house, which we're familiar with. So software management, XEs and MSIs can be deployed. You can use things like GPOs to do that, or jump drives. There's a number of different ways to get applications out onto our devices, but our iOS and Android stuff are pull only right now via the company portal, and we'll see that in a bit. Okay, kind of like this slide. It's a build slide. It just shows that isolation that I was speaking of in terms of company data versus personal data, and then walks you through a couple common scenarios. So again, managed user, we need to get the device enrolled. When we do that, we see we get all our company data onto the device via the centralized location. So if it's lost or stolen and the platform supports it, we completely wipe the entire device. If it's retired, and again, another reason why this isolation is so great, we're just unenrolling the device and pulling off all of the access to company data from it without affecting anything that still remains on the device. So selective wipe, we can get the corporate applications, data, and policies off of there. Full wipe if the platform supports it. We can execute it as the IT pro, or the user can do it via the company portal. The idea of self-service enrolling and unenrolling the device of their choice. And sensitive data or applications can be kept off thing with solutions like Remote App, which is another technology, from Microsoft, where essentially you're RDPing into a RDS farm and publishing out applications that way. Kind of beyond the scope of today's conversation, but just wanted to show you how how you can achieve that sort of complete isolation of company versus private data. So just a little bit about the MDM setup process. I've probably said it 10 times at this point, but we have to have managed users within Intune, and then we configure the mobile device management authority. And for today's purposes, that means the Intune cloud configuration. And then we set up the configuration of direct management channels for Windows RT, for Phone 8, for iOS, and then we can configure Exchange management for Android devices. So just to recap, the mobile device management features per platform. It's over the air. We can inventory the company-based assets. We can deploy settings and policies to control things. We can distribute software in the native platforms, and we can remote wipe if the platform supports it. So Windows Intune clients are deployed to PCs, and this slide just talks to the fact that there are differences between the Windows Intune client and what the mobile devices can actually do. So, our typical desktops, Windows 8, 7, Vista, and XP, we as admins can install the agents and enroll things automatically. Like I said, we could use GPOs with that. We can get things done behind the scenes where the user isn't impacted. RT and Phone 8, we have to define the device owner as a managed user. The user enrolls the device through the company app setting. Again, that's direct management. iOS 4 and later, same thing. The user enrolls the device, and then we're using direct management. And then Android 2.1 or later, the device owner is a managed user, and the user enrolls the device, and that's presently Exchange ActiveSync. So I think I've mentioned this a couple of times already, but I just wanted to put up a formal slide on it. So there's standard deployment methods for getting the agent on a PC. It's direct download, network share, flash drive, self-service portal, or we can use scripts and group policy to do stuff. All right. So that brings us to our demo. So let's hop out here. Let me just make sure this is refreshed. Okay, so here's a good demonstration. We actually use single sign-on ADFS here at Nortec. So my session had gotten stale to the management portal. So just so that kicks me back out to my on-prem ADFS server to put my credentials in, which I will do. So I got a demo within a demo. That's pretty cool. I just want to get everything refreshed here, so I don't have to keep stopping. Okay, so this is your main Intune portal. So when you sign up for the service, you'll have access to this tenant, and if you're a 365 customer already or have seen it, you'll notice it looks pretty much exactly the same as Office 365, except that it says Windows Intune up here. So this is where we set up our users. This is where we, either set them up directly in here or we synchronize with our on-premises Active Directory, which Nortec's configuration, this environment here, is using directory synchronization with single sign-on. So all of my users are from my on-prem directory. Security groups, same thing. Domains, you can verify your own custom domain name that you own. We can manage and apply licenses from here. We actually grab the software to install on PCs from this portal. So this is sort of the springboard into the configuration, into the administration console of Intune. But, to drill it home one more time, it has to be a managed user. So we have to have that user in here with a license assigned before we can start creating groups and assigning devices to that individual. What's going on over there? And these links up at the top, so that'll get you to your company portal, which is where people can enroll and download software. Our administration console, which is this here, and we'll walk through this in a minute. And then my company portal had timed out, so give me a second there. Actually, I could do it this way. So again, because we're using EDFS, I'm redirected to my on-prem EDFS infrastructure for authentication. All right. Not sure what's going on with the portal at the minute. That's fine. We'll go to the admin console for the time being and then let that queue up in the background. So this is your administration. So this is where you create your groups, you assign devices to your users, and you apply policies to those groups, individuals, and devices. So when you first, and this, by the way, ties in directly from your portal here. So this is sort of your source of authority for where the identities are coming from, and then you provision things within here, and then when you go to put people into the groups, it's looking at people that are defined within your portal. And like I said, either manually created or synced with AD. So right off, you come into the sys overview, it tells you, what's going on. So a dashboard, so to speak, of everything that's going on within the devices and software that you're managing. So groups, pretty straightforward. Like I said, we can create groups based on geographical location, based on department, based on any criteria that we like, essentially. All our users are going to show up here. Again, everything's synced from our on-premises Active Directory. Our devices, once enrolled and once managed, once there's a managed user and devices are enrolled and assigned to that user, those devices will show up. You can create groups for those things. Again, pretty straightforward Microsoft thinking here, creating groups based on whatever criteria that makes sense for you. So updates, sort of like WSUS in the cloud, and same sort of thing. We can create update schedules, automatic approval of updates. We have, critical security service packs, everything that's available from, Windows Update and things that we're used to deploying with either System Center Configuration Manager and WSUS within there. Similar idea, we're just doing it all from the cloud. So nothing new there, but the fact that the functionality is pulled out into Intune, I think is pretty cool. So endpoint protection, again, we can deploy this to manage PCs. We create policies in order to do that, and like I said, there is a hierarchy, so it'll know if there's already some sort of endpoint protection installed, and then won't install a second form of endpoint protection. Alerting, we can create policies to alert us to all kinds of different things. Devices are incompliant, devices are infected with malware based on scans that we've created. Anything at all that we want to have alerts generated about so that we can stay out in front of potential issues as they arise. Software, so this is kind of our software repository, so to speak. You get 20 gig by default, and this is where we would upload the packages for deployment out to devices. And detected software means not the personal stuff on mobile devices, but the things that it's seeing on actual PCs via the Intune client. And then the managed software, this is what we can report on for our mobile devices. So this is things that we're published, and just a couple things in here for us for demonstration purposes. These are the things that I'm publishing via the company portal, and I can report up on that kind of stuff. So licensing, this is where we can import volume licensing agreements if that's the way we're licensing Intune. Pretty straightforward there. And then, kind of the good stuff is the policies. Assigning policies to groups, assigning policies to users. Not all wizard driven, pretty straightforward. So we'll just kind of step through this a little bit. So we want to create a new mobile device security policy. We're going to create and deploy a custom policy. And that's going to open up just to show you what some of the settings look like in there. We can set what the passwords are, require, password lengths and those sorts of things. Windows RT specific things. We can do a picture password. We can allow that. Device restrictions, common across all types. The camera, web browser, iOS. We can control if the device has access to iCloud, whether or not they can do photo stream and document sync, because again, we want to create that wall between company data and personal data, so we can put these sorts of things in place. And the only reason that these are even exposed is because of that direct channel management. Active sync, some settings there. Encryption, common across all stuff, so we can force encryption on devices. And then with ActiveSync, we can require encryption on storage cards. So, not trying to get into any real depth here, just kind of letting you know that this is where you go to create the policies, and then there's a bunch of different policies that you can create. That was the mobile device. So then we can create Windows firewall policies, the Intune agent, that was what I showed you on my personal machine before, and then the Intune Center settings, which I also showed you on my PC. And then reporting, all kinds of detailed reporting we can get, which a lot of folks really like that. Software, the inventory, the licensing, anything at all that we want to report on about, the devices that we're managing. And the last tab here is our administration. This is where we'll configure various things to expose them to the other areas that we've already seen. So it's things like we define what updates we want to make available from Microsoft. We define our alerts and notifications about things. Administrator management, who has access to the service, who can log in here and control this stuff. Our mobile device management. There's certain prerequisite steps that you have to take to get some of that stuff set up. It's not super complicated, but there's there are some things that you have to do to start directly managing iOS devices. We have to get a management profile pushed out and a certificate that is also pushed out in order to manage the device. Kind of beyond the scope of today. Again, it's not super difficult to do any of that stuff, but time doesn't really allow for diving down deep into that stuff. And then the company portal, which hopefully I can actually get that to load, because it would be nice to be able to show that to you. It just shows like we can set logos on it. We can define what the links are. It's kind of the look and feel for the end user. Let me try to hit that one more time. It would not be very fun if that was not working. So I'd really like to show you that. That's interesting. So this is this is part of the portal. This is the enrollment process. So it's asking me some questions about, my status as the user of this computer. So I'm going to tell it I am Okay, great. So here's the company portal. If you remember back in the slides, we showed you the consistent experience across all of your different devices. And right here, these are just the application for demonstration purposes that we've published out. So well, the device has to support whatever it is. These are all, Windows-based installs currently, but you could come here with an iOS device, you can come here with an Android device, and you can actually grab applications from this company portal. You can contact IT directly from here, and we can predefine what that information is. We can add a device. So if, for example, I wanted to enroll this computer, or if I was going here from my mobile device, from my tablet, I would do the same process in order to self-enroll that device into the service, so that as long as I'm a managed user, as we've discussed. So I'm already part of this, so I'm not going to actually do this. But essentially, if I enroll this computer, I'm grabbing the install files that reside within the administration, the client software download. That's where I'm actually going, and I'm grabbing this stuff from. And that's just the Windows Intune agent side of the house. That's not the actual published software that we saw back on this page, because that would be grabbed right from the company portal. Okay, so it looks like it's about 10 after 12, and that's about all I had in terms of the slides and the demo. So I hope this was informative in terms of giving you an overall idea of what Intune is and what it can do for you, so that you can start sort of having some conversations internally about how you might be able to leverage it. I want to thank you for your time today, and I will open it up to questions. If you want to throw up any questions that you might have in the chat window, I will do my best to get those answered for you. And I will just throw that up there so you guys can see my contact information. So Eric's asked, do users have to have local admin access to install the apps on their desktops? The answer is it depends on the way that you do the deployment. If you're talking the actual Windows Intune client and they're doing self-service that way, then yes, they have to be local admins. But if you're scripting this or using a GPO to push it out, then no, they don't. And that's kind of how we typically get around things. Create an MSI package to deploy out to PCs so that we don't have to have the users have elevated privileges. Obviously, for mobile devices, that scenario doesn't come into play. So Eric, again, the question is, if a user grabs something that was published and install it, they would have to have local admin access. No, not for the software, just for the actual Intune client piece. Anybody else? All right. Well, if there are no further questions, I will end a little bit early here, and you get some time back for your day. And thanks everybody very much for tuning in. We do appreciate it. If you have any questions whatsoever, please do not hesitate to shoot me an email.